Hey everyone, welcome to Virtual Vegfest Live. And it's Thursday. It's Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, because we have someone on from the West Coast today. And let's remind you that you can enter our contests by going to virtualvegfest.com, which is soon going to become virtualvegfestlive.com. You'll be able to go there and pick the contest tab, and then you can enter to win a prize pack from Follow Your Heart, Hodo Foods, Crafters Organics, Orgain, and Cinnaholic, which is pretty neat. How do you do that? Just do our, go subscribe to, through the contest tab, subscribe to our Virtual VegFest YouTube. That gives you 25 entries right there. So hint, hint, we really want you to do that. And because we're trying to build up our YouTube channel. You can go and subscribe and like to Hodo Foods and Orgain. And this month, Follow Your Heart is our sponsor of our live, so thank you to them. And you have a few days left to enter the July contest. That's 5 prize packs that we're going to be giving away. And thank you to those sponsors for donating those prize packs for us to give them to you. And that's to help us build and grow our platform and our social media. So thank you for that. And I'm completely kind of brain dead today as to what else I want to say. We have a new show coming up. It's called The Vegan Stew. The first episode is going to be on August 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's us women having real and frank conversations, and we're going to stir the pot. That's why we call The Vegan Stew. And it's going to be pretty neat. So 5 ladies getting together, talking about topics anywhere, think honey to James Aspie and everything in between. So we're going to get into it. We're going to be brutally honest, and we want to hear what you have to say as well. So theveganstew.com should be up. You can go take a look at who is on there along with me, my 4 other hosts. And we have our why are you vegan? Why am I vegan, actually? And that is posted on our social media. If you get our newsletter, if you go to virtualvegfest.com or any of our sites, Triangle Vegfest, Vegfest Expos, any of our sites, you pop up, you see the newsletter. You get the newsletter, you'll get access to all our details and information of what's going on with our festivals. Greenville Fun Fest is coming up on August 15th in Greenville, South Carolina. And then on August 22nd, we're in Knoxville, Tennessee for Scruffy City Vegan Fest. Want to be a vendor? Just send an inquiry on vegfestexpos.com. It's a lot of information. Easily get it by going to vegfestexpos.com, and it's all there. So Reverend Beth Love is with us today, and our goal for you is to make climate juicy and why it matters. Because if you haven't noticed, there's heat, fires, storms, a crazy amount of snow if you go back to winter. And we need to do better. And we're going to talk about that. And of course, one of the best gateways to doing better is food. So we're going to talk about that too. I think I have everything. And if I don't, well, that's okay too. Hey, Reverend Beth, how are you?
I am excellent today. How are you, Helene?
I'm okay. So how this happened for everyone to know is Dr. McDougall had a conference-ish on Zoom, and he did them for a few months, and Beth was one of the guests. And I wrote to Dr. McDougall and I said, hey, can you hook us up, please? And he did that immediately because Dr. McDougall is amazing. And we were scheduled and we rescheduled. So here we are. And I really want people to know who you are, what Eat for the Earth is, right? eatfortheearth.org. I'll put that in the comments in a second. And remember, everyone, if you have any questions or comments, put them in the little box. We'll definitely address them. So, Reverend Beth, please tell everyone about you and what you do.
Okay, thank you so much, Helene, for having me on, and thank you for this open invitation to brag about myself. I usually like people to introduce me because then it doesn't sound like bragging, but I'll just say that I've lived an amazing transformational life, that transformation has been the core of my life as I have moved through so many different iterations in terms of my career. But I want to go back to when I was a child because it's really key to understanding who I am, to understand that when I was a child, I had a pretty rough childhood in many ways. And I made a decision then that I was going to change the world. and that I even knew how I was going to do it. I knew at 10 years old that if we were able to raise children differently, if we were able to give children what they need and families what they needed so that they could support their children to grow optimally, that we could change the world. Because everything I looked at in the world that was wrong was as a result of adults who were acting out because they had not had good childhoods. Like I knew that at 10. And it put me on this trajectory that ended up I first started studying Montessori when I was in my teens. So I started studying the Montessori education method of education, and I was like, this is it. And I taught in Montessori schools. I started and ran Montessori schools. I taught educators the Montessori method. And eventually I had a rude awakening that I wasn't going to do it forever, and I was on to the next career, right? And so I've had several, but the thread was always, until I was in my late 50s, was always about the children. The children were always at the center, and in some ways they still are. But I had a radical change almost 6 years ago. After running schools, after starting and founding ministries, becoming ordained as a minister, studying child abuse prevention at school and working in that field, I had this sudden awakening where I realized that if we did not have a habitable family, a habitable planet for our children to live on, then all the good work that I was doing would amount to nothing. That was an epiphany that put me onto a different trajectory, the one that I'm on now. Because I realized that as a long time vegan, and before that, vegetarian since I was a child, that my diet was probably the single largest personal act anyone could do to avert the climate catastrophe. And that's environmental disasters of all kind are concerning to me, but because we're on such a tight time frame with the climate, that's the one that pushes me the most. And when I had that awakening, I was like, I had to like have a come to my source, kind of talk with myself about how all these years knowing what I knew, but not wanting to share it because I was worried about people's judgment. And I also was worried about offending because for most people, diet is very personal. And so as I watched people, I was at that point in leadership in a church that I had helped to found 20 years, almost 20 years previously. And as I watched people around me getting heart disease and diabetes and nearing their death and obesity and all of these other problems, high blood pressure that I knew could be prevented with their diet, I didn't say anything because I was so wary about offending. And these were my congregants. I mean, I wasn't the lead minister, but they were my congregants. And I didn't say anything about diet. What I did, and that I considered powerful, was that I did stealth vegan activism, where I brought the tastiest food I could, and I showed everybody, I demonstrated that you don't have to sacrifice flavor to eat food that's not only good for you, but good for the earth and good for the animals. But I didn't talk about it much. Everybody knew I was vegan, and they already were kind of, raise your hand out there if you're a vegan, and you've had people push back against the fact that you're a vegan, even if you don't open your mouth, right? I mean, people, just our presence shows people the disconnect between their values of not wanting to harm and their everyday actions, right? So our presence is already hard enough. So I didn't say anything. But what happened when I had this change was I was like, okay, I've got to quit my job and I've got to devote the rest of my life to making sure that my children, which is all of the children of the world, have somewhere to live. And that their children after them and their children after them have somewhere to live. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what to do. Um, and so I made that decision. I gave notice. I quit, and I started kind of playing. I started teaching. My idea was I'm going to teach people as fast as I can. People have been telling me write a cookbook, open a restaurant, sell food, for years and years. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach as many people as possible how they can eat this food and love it. And, not just eat vegan food, but eat whole food, plant-based, gourmet meals that were so good for all concerned. And I played for a little while, and then after about 2 years of that, I kind of had this wake up call. My goal is a habitable world for our children, and I've maybe supported 12 people to go vegan and a few more to kind of, or increase their plants in their diet. And so I started Eat for the Earth. which is an organization that's about making it easier for people to eat more plants and less animal products. And we're not trying to get everybody to go vegan. Since this is a show that's about veganism, I'll be completely transparent and say that I firmly believe that we're heading to a vegan world, because if not, we're not going to be able to keep living here indefinitely. But in the meantime, if we could just see a drastic reduction of the consumption and production of animal products, then we'll be back on track with our earth.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like, yes, I'm vegan, ethical vegan, but I want to meet people where they're at, as opposed to trying to force them to be where I think they should be, which is a very big difference. And forcing people never works. So we just need to kind of go, well, like we said before we went live, meatless Mondays, whatever it is, eat vegan until dinner, eat only vegan dinners. Just do something because it makes a difference. And I said the starfish story, where it makes a difference to that one starfish if that starfish lives when the little boy throws the starfish back into the ocean. Well, yeah, you're eating like one meal a week that's vegan actually will make a difference for the climate, the animals too, and your health, but it will make a difference for the climate. It's amazing. And typically when you start there, you don't stop there. They typically kind of go, I feel good. I'm going to add another one. And because it's on their pace, they feel good. And then they kind of go, guess what I did? And you're like, that's awesome. As opposed to, why didn't you do enough?
Yeah. Yeah, that message of why didn't you do enough is not very helpful. I one of the things that I do a lot in my talks is, I remind people that, we need to have a lot of self-love in this process, that radical change does take love, it takes support, eating, even with the changes that have occurred, and we're really in a different place than we were even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, eating plant-based or vegan is still super countercultural. And whenever you go about doing something that's that countercultural, you need a lot of support, you need good tools, good information, because there's forces, whether intentional or not, that are going to kind of pull you back toward your old life. And so I always encourage people, even if you're just doing the reducitarian route, which is more impactful than eating one vegan meal a week, don't even eat any vegan meals. Just see how much you can reduce. I don't even want to talk about reducing. I want to say, how many more plants can you put on your plate? Like, can you imagine your plate full of plants, and then use the animal products as a condiment? And in fact, the science that shows what kind of shift will be needed worldwide in terms of human dietary patterns, especially in countries like the U.S. and other high meat consuming countries, is to have 1/4 of your plate have all the protein foods, including plant and animal origin, and then have the other 3/4 of your plate all plants. And if everybody was eating like that, then we would very quickly draw down enough of the carbon, um, not the carbon dioxide, but the other greenhouse gases associated with animal agriculture, and we would really see a shift in the climate pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because people don't realize what protein is. I just want everyone to know, if you don't realize, every food that you eat has protein in it. And one of the best examples I have for that is a white bagel with peanut butter on it has like 17 grams of protein. I mean, who would think? And 17 grams of protein, if you eat two of those in a day, you've pretty much eaten what the protein you need in the course of your day. So, everything, I'm not talking candy, but I'm talking all the foods that you would eat, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whatever it is. They all have protein. Some have more
Mm-hmm.
protein than animal
Mm-hmm.
products. And you can easily get your protein in a day. I can't believe we went there, but where do you get your protein? But I wanted to, so when you think about the protein on the plate, it's like, yeah, so you have some animal based protein, or a Beyond Burger, or half a Beyond Burger, or a Beyond Sausage, or some sort of plant based meat on there, which you consider your protein. But add quinoa to that, add leafy green vegetable, spinach, kale, and you've got you've got protein in the quinoa, you've got protein in the kale, you've got protein in the what you're considering the main protein source. And you'll be healthier, and if you eat that way, you make a small piece like the what you consider protein and make the rest of it like all the fruits and vegetables and everything else, we will become a slim and fit society.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you went there, Helene, because I'm a really strong believer in eating food rather than macronutrients and micronutrients. And T. Colin Campbell talks about this as holism, right? And a lot of damage has actually been caused by nutritionism, which is this idea that we have to micromanage our bodies. We have to make sure we have enough macronutrients. We have to make sure we have enough micronutrients, and we're trying to manage it. The whole idea of a quarter of the plate, your high protein foods, that comes from the study. One of the largest studies that's been done on this is called EAT Lancet, EAT Lancet. It was published in the Lancet. It was 37 international interdisciplinary scientists that looked at this question of, can we feed the growing world population of expected to be 10 billion by 2050 within the parameters of our Earth system? That is without, going into climate change or running out of water or, running out of land or any of the other things. Like, how can we do it within the parameters of our Earth boundaries in a sustainable way? And they found that we can do that, but that we need to shift to this diet. And on that quarter of the plate, there's beans, there's nuts, there's seeds, there's legumes, and there's chicken, eggs, milk, etc. But there's no extra glass of milk like there is in the USDA. The Canadians have gotten rid of that extra glass of milk. Their plate looks very similar to the Eat Lancet plate. It just needs to be a very small amount, and the rest, the whole grains, the fruits, the veggies. And so, even though that I quoted that with the protein, what I want to encourage people to do is like eat food, because if you get enough calories, whole food, whole, and as many plants as possible, if you get enough calories, you're going to have your protein needs met. You're going to have your other micronutrient, macronutrient needs met.
So in touching on that, this one piece, because we brought up Dr. Campbell, we're talking SOS, salt, sugar, oil, right? So limiting salt, limiting sugar, limiting oil in this in the way they're eating, because that's important too. Because the fat from the oil, well, one, the weight of the oil, we talked about this on the show before. A tablespoon of oil is 120 calories. 120 calories of broccoli is a lot of broccoli. Like, you'll be way full eating 120 calories of broccoli, and that 120 calories of oil is not going to fill you up. It's going to taste good, but you can season with spices, and that will make a difference as opposed to the oil. I'm not 100% against oil, but I do believe that it is wasted calories and the fat, and it's not good for you in your body at all. So
Yeah, that was a wake up call for me, because all those years, like I consider myself eating whole food since I was, pre-adolescent, whole food vegetarian for my health. And, I used olive oil, I used coconut oil, I used sesame oil. I even back then used canola oil, and it was kind of a wake up call for me when I did leave the church position, and I was teaching people. I'd always studied nutrition, but it was it was on the side of my otherwise full life, and so I started like really hitting the books and studying people like Dr. Michael Greger and T. Colin Campbell and Dr. Neil Barnard, and all of these, Dr. McDougall. And really, I was like, whoa, oil. When I saw a video from Dr. Greger, and I'm happy to share it. If anybody wants to see the video, I could find it later and share it with your followers. I saw that video and I was like, olive oil causes your arteries to stiffen? And I was like, I just shut it down. Like, I'm okay, I don't want to know, right? Then I watched it again, week or two later, and shut it down. Watch it. It took me 3 times watching it to go, okay, I'm going to try this. I don't really want my arteries stiffening, right? So of course, it's much better for your arteries than lard or butter or coconut oil or some of these saturated fats. But it still stiffens your arteries, and it causes inflammation in the body. And as you said, Helene, it's empty calories. It also triggers that pleasure trap that Alan Goldhammer talks about, where there's enough salt, fat, and sugar in in the food that you eat more than you would ordinarily, and you get addicted and you keep staying on that treadmill. So there's many, many reasons to give it up or limit it. And I noticed right away, I wasn't overweight, but I lost 10 pounds when I stopped using oil. I had an old kind of minor but chronic inflammatory condition that cleared up. It really did make a difference. And what I encourage people to do is, I don't consider sugar a whole food. So sugar was never in any kind of whole food recipe I would use. But I've shifted to almost entirely dates for sweetener, and they're really good and they're healthy. They have tons of health benefits. So I use dates almost entirely, no oil, and if I'm using salt at all, it's in the form of a probiotic containing food that's fermented with salt, like miso, for instance. And that's just where I've landed. But I do encourage people to kind of look into this for themselves. Of the experts, of the really well-known plant-based experts, some of them use a little salt, some of them even use a little sugar or a little oil. But some of them don't use any of the above, and there's health benefits to be reaped in those ways. And then if we look at the environment, I mean, it can't be good for the environment to be harvesting all these coconuts and oil and everything, growing them, and olives, and making oil out of them, as opposed to, like you said, Helene, some broccoli.
No, I
Yeah,
agree 100%. And that kind of segues us into, I really want to talk more about climate and how this all comes together, because we were saying before we went live, just so you know, for everyone to know, that what's happening on this planet, what we're seeing right before our eyes, that most people are just scared to death over what it is. Because I mean, I look at a date like 2030 and I go, that's 8.5 years from now. I mean, I plan on being alive 8.5 years from now. I'm not so old that I shouldn't be, you know, willing that nothing happens, but I'll still be, I'll be barely in my 50s by that time. And I don't want to live. I kind of look at it and I say, we talk about it in the house, talking about it with Steven, and I say, my partner, and I say, is it like, do we have to build like a dome? And he's like, yeah, they can't do that. Like science wise, it's in movies where they build like a dome that we can live under, but that's not realistic. At least not invented yet. Like maybe that person's not born yet or something. Maybe that person's like a kid that's gonna like invent that for us. But you know, the oppressive heat, the when it's gonna kill us, and we have control. We have control here. But and we have control with a virus as well, and we're not handling that either. So I'm more than happy to go there. Fully vaccinated. We support vaccinations on this program. Just putting that out there. But so how are we gonna save the planet if we can't
yeah.
save people now by putting like a shot in your arm twice? And how are we gonna save the planet from being destroyed? Do we have to like go and be like, your dog and your cat are going to die because you're
Mm,
not eating the right foods?
mm.
Because when we say planet, we don't just mean humans dying. We mean your cute, cuddly animals too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so at the root of all of this, the pandemic, the crisis in the environment, and the crisis we haven't really mentioned yet, but the many crises in terms of human health in the developed world, and in countries who are copying the lifestyle, especially around food, that the root cause is that we're out of alignment with our right relationship with the earth. And I'm not concerned about saving the earth, because I do believe the earth system will continue. But what I'm concerned about is working to ensure that humans and other life forms with whom we share the planet can continue living here, that we don't lose the habitability of the only home we have. Like you said, we can't go under a dome. I know Jeff Bezos wants to build a spaceship, but I don't want to go to a spaceship. I want to live here on this beautiful planet that was created for us, and that I believe that we humans here as stewards of this earth. That is our right role, our right relationship. And we're out of right relationship. And it's causing all of these problems. And the most the clearest and the largest way that we're out of relationship with the natural world is that we're out of right relationship with the non-human inhabitants, or as some Native Americans might say, the greater than human life forms on the earth. And as long as we see the earth and the other inhabitants and the other parts, like the parts of the earth, the minerals, the trees, whatever, as long as we see those as resources to be exploited, to be used, to be manipulated, for our pleasure and for the wealth building of a few people, then we're not going to get it. We're not going to get it right. So we really need to see the earth as our mother, the earth as our life support, and all of the inhabitants as one with us. We're all one. It's like I can't go and eat a piece of bacon on my plate and pretend that pig that gave its life, that didn't give its life, but whose life was taken for that piece of bacon, isn't my sister. I can't pretend that, and I can't pretend that those trees that are being burned down in the rainforest, emitting uh, black carbon, which is 4,000 times as potent as carbon dioxide in warming the earth. And then the reason they're being burned down is to grow cattle and to raise soybeans to feed to pigs in China, cattle and pigs for human consumption. I can't pretend that that's not on my watch, or that is that resources. It's not. It's destruction and desecration of the sacred. And when we shift that around and understand, then we won't be in this situation. And in the meantime, we need to support people to make the movement they can. And I do agree that a lot of people are feeling paralyzed, and there's good reason to feel concerned, because we do have a short time frame. Some say maybe 6 or 7 years before we reach runaway global warming. We're not all going to die in 6 or 7 years, but we will reach at some point this point of no return, that human will not at that point be able to turn things around. We will be on a trajectory toward runaway global warming and the potential destruction of all life on the planet over time. And then, isn't the chaos that we're experiencing now enough? We're already in complete climate catastrophe, but there's reason for hope. I mean, when you were talking earlier, Helen, about vegan before six, it reminded me that our Vice President Kamala Harris is trying to eat plant-based before 6 o'clock. I mean, like, we really have some signs of hope to hang on to, that people are getting this message, that an important part of the climate resolution is in changing our diets. So I think that, and there's other reasons for hope as well. Washington D.C., the mayor just signed a bill that by 2030, their emissions from food purchases made by the city DC will be 25% less emissions. And the only way to do that is by adding more plants in place of some of the animal products. There's lots and lots of signs of hope.
Yeah, that's awesome. And DC also has the no shopping bag rule, or law. I guess it's a law. They're not allowed to give you shopping bags. You have to bring your own, which is weird if you're not from there and you buy a lot of stuff. But they have like hidden bags to give you if that's the case. But they'll charge you for that most likely. If they know you're from out of town, they might help you out. But really, bring your bags if you go to DC, because you're they they're not you need to bring your own bags, which is awesome. And these little
That's
things,
awesome. Yeah.
it's these tiny little things.
Yeah.
And then we go to, I mean, you're in California, you have a drought.
Yeah, and wildfires. I mean,
Yeah.
we just Eat for the Earth had an annual wilderness retreat, and I am seriously considering never doing one again. I had 13 people out in the wilderness in the Tahoe National Forest, beautiful place. I had been religiously checking smoke and fire maps for days. The weather was supposed to be clear and sunny. There were no indications that some of the fire or smoke would come our way, but we woke up on the third morning of our trip, planned to be a 5-day trip, and the sky was entirely full with smoke. And out in the wilderness, you can't tell what's going on, because there's no wireless, there's no communication. And so we evacuated, we hiked out, we did a fast hike out because we had no way of knowing if a new fire had just started, like right over the ridge. So we did a, fast pull everything together, hike out. As soon as we got out far enough to see some people coming in and asked them, and they said there were no new fires. We knew it was one of the very distant fires, smoke from that, but we still had to evacuate because it wasn't healthy, right? And I mean, there's, in my neighborhood, last year during the summer fires, the evacuation line from our homes was 1 mile away from my house. I know people who lost their homes. I know many, many people who were evacuated from their homes. It's like this is the climate crisis, and people are not necessarily making the connection, even that this is about the climate, because they don't understand that the climate is what's driving these droughts. And the trees are also dried out. And then they don't make the further leap of understanding that what they're eating is one of the contributors to the climate crisis. And that's one of Eat for the Earth's big mission, is to really help people understand that what we eat makes an impact on the earth and on the earth's systems. And in fact, when there's a framework in scientists called planetary boundaries. There's 9 planetary boundaries, and these are boundaries that look at Earth system processes, that if we get too far out of alignment with what the Earth can tolerate, then it leads to chaos, right? So there's the climate, there's the ocean acidification, there's air pollution, there's all these different boundaries, and we're already past the safe zone and in the increasing risk zone, or the very dangerous zone, on 5 of those boundaries. And of those, 4 of them, animal agriculture is the primary, or one of the primary drivers. So what we eat makes a big difference. But at Eat for the Earth, we're not even so much focused, we want to support people who want to shift their diet, and we do a lot of education. But what we're really interested in is systems change, because we really need to have both. We need to have the grassroots action. We need to have enough people saying this is what we want for government officials to make changes. But we also need governments and corporations and huge institutions to change their policies and practices, so that we can do this on time. And that's why I get excited, because some of these governments I mentioned one, a school district, Oakland Unified School District. They reduced their animal product purchases by 30% for their school lunch and breakfast programs, and they had a corresponding shift in reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. They saved money. They saved 43 million gallons, 1,000 gallons of water. I mean, it was really a big success.
That's amazing. And equating that to the amount of water that it takes to process just one cow, and the amount of damage to the climate from animal agriculture. The damage to the climate from animal agriculture is more than every form of transportation on the planet. And we're talking ships and planes and automobiles and buses, everything. Put them all together, and there's a lot of them across the planet. Animal ag is more destructive than all of them put together. That's a big deal. I can't remember the stat for how much water it takes to process one cow. I feel like it's like 8,000 gallons or something. It's a lot.
It's probably more than that, because it's about 660 gallons of water to create 1/4 pound hamburger.
There it is. I mean, 660 for a quarter-pound hamburger, and a cow is a big animal, and it's not just the processing of it's not just the growing of the animal, of the cows. It's also the cleanup as well that goes into, because there's a streak of blood on the floor there that needs, well, if they clean it up, it gets cleaned up eventually. So there's every piece of water that goes into raising a cow for food. And then you go into the food that we raise, the cutting down of the rainforest so we can grow crops, so we can feed animals, so that the animals can be slaughtered, so that we can eat them. Celeste Rao has a fantastic story about this,
Mm-hmm.
with the family, with the kids, the sibling who was making the food, and not having it. So I'm going back like over a year, I think, for when I was like a year when I spoke to Slush. But basically, this family, siblings, and they could they take all this food and they feed their animals with the food, and then they hardly have any food for like the seven siblings. And if they actually
Yeah.
took the food that they were feeding their animals that they would actually slaughter to feed themselves, they could all eat and they could all eat well. It's like
And they
very
could feed
condensed
their
ration.
neighbors.
Oh yeah, we could feed the planet. There would be
Yeah.
there would be
No
nobody
hunger.
hungry on this planet if the food we fed to the animal ag industry was fed to humans. Soy and corn? Seriously?
Wheat. Yeah.
Wheat? Yep.
Yeah. Barley. All of that stuff. Yeah.
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 No
Yeah.
hunger. None.
Yeah.
Those cute little
Yeah.
kids and like cute little kids, those poor distressed children on those commercials that they're not I don't really watch commercials anymore, but I don't know if they are on television anymore where they show the little kids with the distended bellies because they're starving. Like that doesn't have to happen.
Right.
I mean, that's obviously that's putting us in another country, but there's a lot of hungry people in this country
Yeah.
that don't need to be hungry because
Hmm.
people are eating animals.
Yeah, it's not a lack of abundance. I mean, we live on this incredibly abundant planet, but we use the abundance in very wasteful ways. And animal agriculture is one of the most wasteful. It's wasteful in terms of water, in terms of petroleum products, uh, in terms of the land that it uses, and it's also wasteful in terms of the amount of pollution. The ocean dead zones. People don't necessarily know the those crops that are gobbling up the water that's making that hamburger 660 gallons. Those crops are being fertilized with nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers that making its way into streams and waterways, polluting along the way, getting out to the ocean, and creating these algal blooms, these toxic algal blooms that choke out all the other life. So these huge, massive swaths of oceans are dead because of animal agriculture, because of the practice of raising food for those animals instead of raising food directly for humans. So yeah, and since you talked about Dr. Rao, Silas Rao, people might be interested to know that he did a very good analysis of the percentage of the greenhouse gas, the warming that can be properly attributed to animal agriculture. There's a lot of different ways that's figured, but sometimes the figures don't take into account certain things. Like they call that burning of the rainforest, they call that land use change rather than calling it attributing it to animal agriculture. They call it land use change. So they're burning the rainforest. It's taking out all those trees that were formerly, I mean, trees are the best solution to the climate crisis, right? Because they're going to sequester carbon. So they're taking those out. They're adding all this black soot to the air, and that's not animal agriculture, even though what's going in there is animals. So when he did his analysis, he came up with a figure much higher that it's at, I can't remember whether it was 80 some percent or up to 90%, that the vast majority of the climate crisis is being driven by animal agriculture rather than petroleum. And in fact, part of that is because when you burn fossil fuels, they emit particles that are cooling as well as particles that are heating the atmosphere. So they're kind of canceling each other out in the short term. Though the heating particles, the carbon dioxide, last 10,000 years, right? Some of it's still there 10,000 years later, and much of it hundreds of or thousands of years later, but those cooling particles are gone more quickly. So in terms of a solution, not only, like, I don't even try to argue too much about what's causing it, but in terms of a solution, if you think about, like, when I drive my gas car, some of those emissions are still going to be in the atmosphere in 10,000 years. Like, we don't have 10,000 years to turn this around. So even if we, like, stopped burning fossil fuels completely tomorrow, we don't solve the climate crisis. But if we drastically reduce animal agriculture tomorrow, we do resolve it, because those emissions associated with animal agriculture, the methane, the black carbon, the nitrous oxide from spraying the fields with nitrogen fertilizers, those come out of the atmosphere much more quickly, so that we can start bringing that temperature down very quickly. And then we need to deal with the fossil fuels as well,
So
but they're
there
not short term.
so I have a question. So someone's watching, they're vegan. what can they do? Because they're like, I'm already doing, and you're frustrated, right? And you're seeing everything that's going
Right.
on. It's like, well, what more can, what more can I do?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Helene. Like what I do in addition to being vegan is I also do my best to buy food that's organically grown and close to home, and those things also have an impact. But in terms of what has the most impact, what you eat has much is much more important than where it's grown or how it's grown. Okay, so if you have to choose one, like the locavores who are eating this meat that's grown close to home, you're not doing the planet nearly as much of a favor. It's very little because transportation and those other things are a smaller part of the climate footprint and the water footprint rest. But what I'm really excited about is what we can do collectively. Because as individuals, we can only do that one starfish, right? But collectively, we can figure out a system that goes upstream instead of waiting till the starfish are drowning and drag them out one at a time. We can figure out why all these starfish are ending up, drowning, right? So collective action is really important. And that's why Eat for the Earth started Eat for the Earth Communities. It's a new initiative that we launched on Earth Day this year. And what we're doing is we're providing a safe, supportive, connected, um, loving community where people can tap in and get ideas for how they can take action in their own communities to make systemic changes, or to make whatever kind of change they feel, moved to make, and can build community together so we can give each other ideas, we can give each other support, we can collaborate together. We have members of our community who are doing things like hosting dinner parties for their friends and family where they feed them a really yummy vegan meal and give them some information about the connection between what they're eating and what's going on in the environment, right? Or we have members who are writing a book about their own family's vegan journey and getting support for each stage of the way. Or it could be writing to legislators. We can share the language for letters to the editor. So there's all kinds of possibilities. And I would really encourage any of your listeners who would like to do more than just, I don't want to say just their own diet, because that's making a difference. I just really want to affirm that your diet is making a difference. And if you want to do more, if you feel motivated to do more, we'd love to have you in Eat for your communities. And you don't have to have a project in mind. You can just join us and we'll support you in finding, like, what is your unique way of making a larger contribution.
No, that's great. I mean, because you are making a difference. Buy a hybrid car. An electric car. Buy an electric hybrid car. I mean, there's things that you can do when you go to do something like that that makes a difference. You can walk somewhere if it's close enough instead of driving. I mean, if you bike, you can bike somewhere. Granted, it's disgusting in the heat and the humidity during the summer, but I mean, I have a friend who would bike to work because she was close enough all year. She'd have like the cover on her head when it's cold because it could get cold here, and she'd bike possibly in the ice and the snow. There was no point in she didn't have to drive her car because when she got to work, she could stay there, and then she was close enough to home to bike back. I mean, everybody has their thing. That doesn't mean that's your thing, but there are things you can do outside of, just what the food that you put on your plate, the food that you put on other people's plates, invite people over for
Mhm.
dinner. I consider vegan food, the gateway drug to veganism. It really is. For the festivals that we produce, we reach tens of thousands of people every year, exposing them to the benefits of a plant based diet. That's my activism. And then this because of COVID. But we reach a lot of people. And
Mhm.
the goal is to plant seeds if it's new for you and if you are in this, to keep you in it, because it is better for the health and the environment, and of course for the animals. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's so I reiterate, you are eating vegan. You are, well, if you're vegan, you're ethical probably. If you're eating plant-based, thank you. If you're vegan, you probably get all the other pieces that we're talking about right now. So, and then you have the people that aren't vegan. right? So they look at California and they hear the stories of Hoover Dam being at the lowest levels. If you don't know, that's the lowest levels like ever. And the
Mhm.
Hoover Dam filters water to, let's see, Las Vegas and parts of California. And
Mhm.
the only way to replenish water on this planet, if you don't know, it's a really simple thing. I used to be an educator in the classroom, and I say to the kids, how do we get water? And they'd be like, oceans. And I'd be like, no. How do we get water that we can actually drink? And they'd be like, it's like the faucet, like kids. And I'd be like, it has to rain. The only way we have water is if it rains. And it's not raining on the west coast of this country right now. It
Mhm.
hasn't rained, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure it's going to rain anytime soon.
Mhm.
And, you know, pay attention to that because it could happen
Mhm.
anywhere. It
Mhm.
has, right? But then you have the fires, and of course, like there's really no storms on the west coast, but in the mountains there's storms with the lightning strikes, and that's what causes the trees to go up. And of course, if it's dry, that's how the fires start. If it's not human made, friends of ours lost their house in the fires last year. They had PTSD from it, and of course,
Mhm.
fires this year. I can't even imagine what they're feeling when you hear those alarms. They lost everything. They lost every single thing except for what they could put in their cars when they left. And
Mhm.
they watched their cameras turn off. So I mean, I think that one was the fire that was caused by those stupid people who the bride the baby shower thing. So it wasn't.
Mhm.
I mean, at least if
Mhm.
it's nature, you kind of go, well, it's nature. When it's human made, it's really frustrating. Like, don't do that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And some of those people are, evacuating year after year after year. I met a child from the Santa Rosa area who's fourth year evacuation. It takes a toll.
it,
Yeah.
it's but if people will say, but you choose to live there.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. California is an absolutely beautiful state. It is the most progressive in the country. It is perfect for people that are liberal and like laws that are beneficial to all these types of things. But tornadoes. People live in Tornado Alley and their homes,
Yeah.
they've had multiple homes destroyed because of tornadoes. And those are
Yeah.
vicious. And then you've got people on the West Coast who are deathly afraid of hurricanes, which was really cute to me when I lived out there because I was like deathly afraid of earthquakes when I moved west. And they would say, well, hurricanes are really scary. And I'd be like, ah, it's a storm. I mean, I've cleaned my pantry during hurricane, earthquake. I was like, the earth shakes. I mean, I felt more earthquake in 7 years in California. I happened to be at a hockey game, a playoff hockey game with the Sharks in San Jose, and the seat vibrated, and you watched a whole upper bowl of the arena. The game still played. The lower section had no idea. The upper section all felt it, and it just buzzed around the whole arena. Cell service kind of went out, and I was like, was that an earthquake? And my friend was like, yeah, and I was like, that was my first one. I thought I would run home. I thought I was like, earthquake. I'm leaving California right now. No, I stayed. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's scary, but natural disasters are everywhere on this planet.
But they're increasing in frequency and they're
Yes.
also increasing in impact.
Yep.
Yeah, we've had drought in California before, but like you said, we're waiting for rain and we could be waiting for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And sadly, what people think and what the authorities say is, turn off your faucet while you're brushing your teeth and use your dishwasher and you do fewer loads of laundry. And household use accounts for like maybe 7% of any individual's personal water footprint. And then a much larger chunk is for making our consumer goods, our doodads, our computers, our clothes, etc. And then the vast majority, over 70%, is from the food that we eat. But people don't know this and they're not being told that. It's not on most lists of how you can conserve water. It's
Right.
not on most lists of how you can reduce your uh, contribution to greenhouse gas emissions.
I remember, I think last drought, didn't your governor say something along the lines of eat less meat? And he got destroyed for saying it.
It could have been our governor. I know that Kamala Harris got destroyed in the during the campaign, and then of course Joe Biden as president, when he said something like that, there was a major storm of trying to take away my meat. So it's very politically, it's very hard to go there. Very hard to go there.
It's difficult to go anywhere where we try to say to people you need to limit such and such, and you can fill in the blank because there's a lot of things there in order to have such and such. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
concept is in our lives every single day, right? You need to save money to go on vacation. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't save, then you can't afford to do that. You do this to be able to do that. And if saving means that you don't go out to eat every week so that you can go away, then that's what you do. You people get it on those simple terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or people just go, I'll just charge it and never pay my credit cards. That is probably the attitude more than the let me sacrifice a little so that I can have more in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And that and the individualism, the me, and as vegans, we're really about us, community
Mm-hmm.
and planet, and saying to people who have children, do you want your children's children to have a planet? I mean, because there won't be one. And do you believe that? Well, you won't be alive to know. But your kids, what kind of suffering do you want your kids to have because of our
Yeah.
behaviors now?
Yeah. Yeah.
What a sad thing to kind of get
Yeah.
towards the end of this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we even hardly touched on COVID, but your comments really reminded me of COVID too, because many people don't know that the whole, like the whole focus on finding drugs to alleviate symptoms, and then also finding a vaccine to to keep people from having the worst outcomes of this particular virus. It's I feel very disappointed in the public health community, because public health is supposed to be looking at cause and dealing with cause. And the cause of this pandemic and most of the modern pandemics is the human appetite for animals' bodies, parts, and secretions. Because if we weren't raising animals in close confinement to be able to suit that appetite, and if we weren't having these wet markets to do that, just really want to emphasize it was a wet market this time, but it's been factory farms in the past and could be again. And we don't have enough land to raise the amount of meat that we're raising in factory farms if we set them all free, to live, these idyllic, happy farm lives. That is the cause of this pandemic and others, and that as long as we're not dealing with cause, there will be another pandemic and possibly much worse than this one. So we owe it to our children to look at the cause. We owe it to our children to radically alter the way we source our food and the types of foods we're sourcing as a human family, so that they can have a planet to inherit that's at least as gorgeous and amazing and sustainable as the one. I'm 64 years old. We were already on this trajectory thousands of years ago when humans started clearing land for agriculture. People think it's the rise of fossil fuels that set us on the trajectory for global warming, but it's not. If you look at when the warming started, it predates digging up fossil fuels from the ground. It's from clearing land for animals, to raise animals for food. And we've been on this trajectory a very, very long time, but the earth that I inhabited was not nearly as unstable as the earth we're living in today in terms of its capacity to support life. So we owe it to our children to make changes. And I hope that folks will want to join Eat for the Earth or find out more about our organization and get involved with us.
Yeah, I hope so too. And education, joining is one of the best ways. And it sounds like you've created something that is necessary and incredible and not something that'll be oppressive and comfortable. And of course, I know you're a chef, Beth as well. So I know you do cooking demos, and you have a Food for Life instructor who's part of that. I don't remember her name, but the Food for Life instructor is part of your cooking demo side, and that really helps for people to. PCRM is where Food for Life comes from. If you don't know PCRM.org, and they are the SOS type of cooking. So you'll learn to cook without oil, use water saute, and eat really healthy with lots of spices and flavors, and yeah, that's amazing. So I mean, that's a good segue too. How do people get in touch with you?
They can go to our website, which is eatfortheearth.org. They can email me if they want at admin@eatfortheearth.org. And just, note that Eat for the Earth has two E's in a row, so it looks a little funny. Um, but yeah, we typically 2 or 3 times a month, not every month, but most months we have these classes where you can join the class virtually from anywhere that has wireless and where you are awake enough and learn how to make really delicious, healthy food that's good for you, good for the earth, and good for all life kind. Or you could join Eat for the Earth communities and get support to make a difference where you live. And there's many other ways to get involved as well, and we'd love to have your participation.
The
We
page
also
of
have two Facebook groups.
Thank you.
Yeah. Eat for the Earth Santa Cruz and Eat for the Earth Worldwide. And those are places where you can learn things, give and receive support, ask questions. And we welcome people of any dietary preference. As long as people acknowledge that we need to shift diets as a human species toward more plants, we welcome you. We do not discriminate against omnivores. We would like to support you in going as far as you will toward vegan. As Melody Joy says, she says, be as vegan as you can.
Exactly. Everyone, and just know, every person who's vegan has said they would never be vegan. It has been, it has come out of all our mouths. I'll never do that. And then it's like, oh, 10 years later,
I was the biggest apologist for dairy. The biggest, it was destroying my health, but I was pretending I was to myself it was something else because I was so addicted because dairy is super addictive. I had a cheese business.
Oh, wow.
But I eventually understood that my ethical vegetarianism was not so ethical, and that I was harming other living beings for my dairy. And when I made that realization and quit, that's when I got my health. After
That's amazing.
20 years of health food vegetarianism, I
Yep.
finally got healthy when
I'm
I
right,
gave up the
right there
dairy.
with you. Over 20 years of vegetarianism, and I thought when I bought organic milk, dairy milk, I was like, oh, but I'm buying organic, and then, and then, and then you go and you learn, well, that's more harmful for the cows, because those poor cows can't be given antibiotics or any type of medicine when their teats get like clogged and they're in pain
Mhm.
to give that milk, right? Because it's not going to their babies, it's going into the factories. And you kind of go, oh my goodness, I thought I was putting something better in my body when actually I was causing these cows to have these female cows to have so much pain
Mhm.
because they can't be taken care of because you can't put anything in the milk because it's organic. And then you stop drinking milk. Because
Yeah.
yeah, before I went vegan, I was already not drinking dairy milk and I wasn't eating eggs. It wasn't much left, you know, to remove. But you just kind of like, I'm gonna remove some more, and then now it's like you're not removing anything because there's so many foods. I mean, everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not about sacrifice. I don't believe any sacrifice is required. We do have to sacrifice, our habits, our customs, something we might feel attached to. But in terms of a real sacrifice of doing something that's worse or less than or in any way not glorious and amazing, we can eat the best, most amazing, most delicious food that has flavor on its own. I mean, if you go whole food plant based and eliminate the salt, sugar, and oil, you can pick up a carrot and it's so sweet, crispy, yummy, so much flavor. A strawberry. The most tasty foods on the earth are the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because it's the plants that they use to flavor the animal products. Because
Mhm.
that's what an herb is. That's what a spice is. It's a plant.
Right.
Because the food wouldn't taste good unless you put those spices and herbs onto it. That's why you eat the herbs and the vegetables and all that. It adds to the flavor in a
Yeah.
dish. Like a stew has carrots and potatoes and onions and garlic and all those things, right? That's the
Right.
flavor.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. And
good.
the only reason that the meat tastes flavorful to us, or the dairy products of another species, is that we've been taught to love that flavor from the time we were really little, and weren't able to give it thought. That's what we were taught.
Right.
We were also taught to love Jello. We were also taught to love Kool-Aid, candy, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not necessarily good for us or good for the earth, but that's what we were taught. But we can reteach ourselves. The good news is our taste buds change over really quickly. If you reduce your salt, or give it up completely, you won't be able to tolerate most restaurant food. It'll just be way too salty. Like I can't tolerate like oily food anymore since I gave up oil. I went to Cafe Gratitude with some friends, and one of them was raving about this mozzarella cheese, right? And when I tasted it, it was like my mouth just filled up with coconut oil, and it was just like so unpleasant, because our taste buds adjust quickly.
They do, and they'll adjust the other way really quickly if you start eating those foods. It's a two-way street there, so just be
Yeah,
careful.
yeah.
They're really careful. Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining me. This has been amazing and important for everyone to understand about our impact on this planet and what we can do, the differences, whether you're vegan or not. And thank you because you keep on doing what you're doing because it's incredibly important and it's been a long journey since you started at 10.
Thank you, Helene.
Oh,
Yeah, and still on it. And thank you for all you do as well. It's amazing.
well,
Really
thank you.
appreciate your work.
Oh, no problem. All right, well, have a great day and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right,
Alrighty.
bye.
Bye bye.
Well, everyone, thank you once again for joining us for Virtual Vegfest Live. And I have no idea what's happening next week. I'm pretty sure I have two talks next week, actually, because I don't know how I did that, but I did. So let me see. On the 3rd, I'm going to go live with Vegan Pop Eats 2 from Instagram. That's Angela Yvonne. And then that's on Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then Thursday, the Nomadic Vegan rescheduled. And that will be at our normal time at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So that's actually pretty neat. So it's two talks next week. And then no talks probably for like 2 weeks because we have festivals and we'll be on the road. So super excited about that. Going to South Carolina and going to Tennessee. And we're in North Carolina, if you don't know that. That's where we're based. And again, let's remind you to go to virtualvegfest.com and shop our vendors and to enter our contests and to subscribe to Virtual Vegfest on YouTube. To remember to get vaccinated if you're not and to wear a mask if you are indoors, vaccinated or not at this point, because we're back to that and it's important to stay safe and not make other people sick and to love one another and be kind. So please practice that as well. And one of the ways you can do that, I don't have a mask up here like I used to, is to wear your mask correctly over your nose and under your chin and wear it indoors. Outdoors is inherently safer than indoors. And to, like I said, please, I implore you to get vaccinated because I want you to be alive and not get sick or be a long hauler. Please. And, care enough about that other person that you could kill because they can't manage, their body won't get through getting this virus. And isn't that why we're vegan? To care and care about one another. So that's it. Off my soapbox. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. I will see you next week. And thanks again to Follow Your Heart for sponsoring this month. And next month, new contest. Next time we're on. Thanks. Bye.